Hello, and welcome to my YouTube channel on history. Today, we'll be exploring one of the most significant events of the 20th century, the First World War, which lasted from 1914 to 1918. We'll be looking at the causes, the major battles, the impact on society, and the consequences of the war. So, let's get started. Causes of the war. The First World War was a result of a complex set of factors, including imperialism, nationalism, militarism, and alliances. European powers were competing for colonies and resources, which led to tensions between them. Nationalism was also on the rise, with people identifying with their countries and seeking independence. Militarism was another factor, with many countries building up their armies and weapons. Finally, the alliance system meant that any conflict between two countries could quickly escalate into a larger war. Major battles and turning points. The war began with the assassination of Archduke Franz Ferdinand of Austria-Hungary in Sarajevo, Bosnia, in June 1914. This event triggered a series of alliances, and soon, countries were declaring war on each other. Some of the major battles of the war included the Battle of the Somme, the Battle of Verdun, and the Battle of Gallipoli. These battles saw massive casualties, and the war quickly became a stalemate. However, the tide turned in 1917, with the entry of the United States into the war, and the use of new weapons like tanks and airplanes. Impact on society. The First World War had a profound impact on society, both during and after the war. Millions of soldiers and civilians died or were injured, and many families were affected by the loss of loved ones. The war also saw the rise of new technologies, including poison gas and submarines, which would have a significant impact on future wars. The war also changed the roles of women, as they took on new responsibilities while the men were away at war. Finally, the war contributed to the collapse of empires and the rise of new nations, including the Soviet Union and Yugoslavia. Consequences of the war. The First World War had far-reaching consequences that are still felt today. The Treaty of Versailles, which ended the war, imposed harsh penalties on Germany, which many historians argue contributed to the rise of Hitler in the Second World War. The war also led to the creation of the League of Nations, which aimed to prevent future wars but ultimately failed to do so. Finally, the war had a profound impact on art, literature, and culture, as artists and writers grappled with the trauma of the war and its aftermath. Life in the trenches. One of the defining features of the First World War was the trench warfare that dominated the Western Front. Soldiers on both sides dug elaborate networks of trenches, which were designed to protect them from enemy fire. However, life in the trenches was brutal and often deadly. Soldiers had to deal with mud, rats, lice, and disease. They were also at constant risk of attack from enemy snipers and artillery. The trenches were also a breeding ground for a new kind of warfare, which relied on poison gas and other chemical weapons. War propaganda. The First World War was also notable for the use of propaganda, which was used by governments on both sides to rally support for the war effort. Propaganda posters and films were used to depict the enemy as evil and to encourage people to enlist in the armed forces. The war also saw the rise of censorship, as governments sought to control the flow of information and suppress dissent. The end of the war. The end of the war came in 1918, with the signing of the armistice on November 11. The armistice was a temporary cessation of hostilities, which paved the way for the signing of the Treaty of Versailles. The Treaty of Versailles imposed harsh penalties on Germany, including large reparations payments and territorial losses. The treaty also led to the collapse of the German Empire and the rise of the Weimar Republic. The end of the war was marked by widespread celebrations, as people around the world welcomed the end of 4 years of bloodshed. Legacy of the war. The First World War left a lasting legacy, which is still felt today. It led to the deaths of millions of people and caused widespread destruction. It also contributed to the collapse of empires and the rise of new nations. The war also had a profound impact on the international system, leading to the creation of the League of Nations and ultimately the United Nations. Finally, the war had a profound impact on culture, inspiring some of the greatest works of literature and art of the 20th century. In conclusion, the First World War was a defining event of the 20th century. It was a complex and devastating conflict that changed the course of history. The war was caused by a combination of factors, including nationalism, imperialism, and alliances. The war saw some of the deadliest battles in history, and it had a profound impact on society, technology, and culture. The legacy of the war is still felt today, and we should continue to remember the sacrifices made by those who fought and died in the conflict. Thank you for watching.